Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the 2014 World Dairy Expo. My name is Mary Elvkrog, and I'm with Badgerland Financial. And we are very happy to be the sponsor of today's seminar. Our speaker today is Sarah Cornelis, a Senior Extension Associate at Penn State University. Sarah is a Senior Extension Associate in the Department of Agriculture, Economics, Sociology, and Education at Penn State University. She focuses on agricultural entrepreneurship. I read that before and I thought that's a tongue twister for this Saturday morning. With emphasis on business planning and decision-making, marketing, and value-added agriculture. Sarah also has an interest in the use of social media for agriculture, farm, and food business marketing, and value-added dairy and meat enterprises. I also want to mention that this seminar has been approved for continuing education credits from the American Registry of Professional Animal Scientists and the American Association of Veterinary State Boards, or RACE, R-A-C-E. Forms are available in the back if you are interested in RACE credits. I would also like to ask you to please silence your cell phones at this time. So, Sarah, welcome to World Dairy Expo.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Sorry. For coming this morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to be out here at World Dairy Expo. It's my first experience, and it's been very exciting so far. I also our time together will cover. And as you can see, this is going to take more of a decision-making perspective on the issue, more than a production processing perspective. I have some resources on one slide that if you're interested in learning more about processing aspects, I have some names of some places that you can go to learn more. However, my background is really more on the business planning, decision-making side of things, so that's what we're going to focus on. I would like to say I am much more comfortable with more of an informal, interactive workshop experience, so please feel free to stop me and ask questions throughout as opposed to waiting till the end of the time. So to get started off, I just wanted to share the USDA definition of value added. You can see there's several components to it. And I won't read it all, but if we jump down to the numbers, you can see the first aspect is a change in the physical state. So when we think about value-added milk products, dairy products, obviously changing the physical state, thinking cheese, yogurt, ice cream, processed products. You can also differentiate and have value add through differentiated production or marketing, or product segregation. And this is simply separating your product and marketing it to your market audience in a different way that separates it from, say, a competitor's product. So you're telling the consumer, this product is different and here's why you should buy it. And in the end, value add is really whatever you can do to your milk to gain a greater market share, increase the price that you receive for that product. And we'll talk a little bit more about what some of those options are to you. So, since you're all here today, I imagine that you have some level of interest in exploring value-added product enterprises. So I'd be interested in hearing why are you thinking about value-added? What is your interest? Why would you be interested in starting a value-added dairy enterprise? Okay, so you have a good location. Excellent. That's very important when it comes to marketing. Okay, increased profitability. Any other reasons that one might explore value-added dairy. Okay, so kind of going back to the past sort of thing. Very good. Interesting.
Imagine a lot of us don't necessarily want to grow a whole lot, so we'd like to be a way to be more profitable without adding a whole lot more time.
Okay, very good. You don't want to grow, and so how can you increase profitability on that same cow base, land base that you have? All very good reasons. Here's the three that I came up with, and at least in Pennsylvania, are popular reasons for starting value-added dairy enterprise. Improve profitability, and that's been stated here. Really, that's primary reason people are looking at, going value-added, is to increase their bottom line. Support another generation or another family. In Pennsylvania and Northeast, where I'm from, you've got a lot of the next generation coming back to the farm and saying, we can't grow. So they've got that limited land base. We can't grow. So how can we integrate that next generation that really wants to be involved in the farm? How can we support them financially? And this is one way of doing that. And the third reason that we've seen is somebody has a passion or an interest in a product, and this is very important, as we'll talk about when it comes to choosing a product. You need to be passionate about what it is that you're doing, and typically somebody is very interested in, say, cheese or yogurt or organic milk or locally produced and sold milk, and so that's one of the reasons that they decide to go down this route. In the end, it all goes back to sustainability of that dairy business. You're looking for something that's going to sustain the dairy business into the future. You're keeping it in production, keeping the business going for the next generation, and it's being profitable, and that's a key. So to look at the growth of value-added dairy over the past decade, 15 years, I just wanted to use Pennsylvania as a snapshot. We have seen this growth across the country, especially in the past 10 to 15 years. Value-added has become very popular, and there's been an increased movement of producers looking to start an enterprise on their farm. In Pennsylvania, we do allow raw milk sales, and so in terms of, my pointer isn't working, but in terms of, here we go. In 2013, we have 186 permits for the sale of fluid raw milk or manufactured aged cheese 60 days or longer. We have, down here, I have 55 permits for the raw milk cheese. So the majority of those are then the fluid milk. And the only thing that we can't do in Pennsylvania is sell across state lines. But if you're interested in raw milk, it is considered, it does fall in that definition of value added, but you should certainly check to make sure that that's legal in your state. And there's differences from state to state in terms of what's allowable and what's not when it comes to raw milk and raw milk products. Artisan cheese producers in Pennsylvania, you can see the growth in that. In just the past 7 years, we've gone from 41 in 2006 to 94 artisan cheese producers in 1994. Jeffrey Roberts was my source for these numbers. He wrote the Atlas of Cheese in the United States, and he has told me, and I concur with this, it's difficult to really get a good handle on the true number of artisan cheese producers in any one state across the country. There's a lot of folks that are doing this that they're not necessarily in a database somewhere. And then we also have an increased number of farms that are selling milk from goats and sheep in Pennsylvania. In 2012 Ag Census, this number was just over 200 farms that sold these dairy products. In the 2007 Dairy Census, the number wasn't even reported. It was so low. And goats and sheep and other dairy producing animals, they also fall within this definition of value added because it's not your traditional dairy product or source for dairy products, at least in the United States. So if you're thinking about perhaps changing from cows to sheep or goats, that is an option as well. I have not seen milk from sheep. Certainly goat's milk I've seen for sale, fluid goat's milk, but I've not seen fluid sheep's milk. It's typically cheese for sheep. Yes, I've sheep cheese, yeah. Okay, so because I have this business planning background, I really like to, go in that perspective. So we're going to talk about important questions, and I've labeled it important questions as opposed to business plan because we found that business plan scares people away. And so instead we're going to call this important questions. And this is really, when in my discussions with dairy producers in Pennsylvania and some other Northeast states that have gone the value-added route, the amount of time spent in planning has been substantial. Especially the ones that are profitable and successful down the road. It's not unheard of to spend 2 to 5 years planning out this new enterprise and ensuring that you've got the market, you've got the production down, and you've got the financial plans laid out for to ensure your success. So the first question is, do I want to do this? There's typically somebody in the dairy business that's going to be the driver for a value-added dairy enterprise. Okay? Doesn't really matter who that person is. It might be a son or daughter coming back to the farm. We've seen wives of dairy farmers decide that this is really where their interest lies. Somebody is going to be a driver, and they've got to be passionate about this enterprise because there's going to be significant time investment, resource investment, and you've got to be committed to it. It's not something to go into lightly. If you want to have it be a success, you've got to really make that commitment of yourself as well as your resources. The second question is, are family members interested or in agreement about exploring this option to adding this new enterprise? Because typically they're for the one person who's the driver of the enterprise, they need that support system around them. So they've got, if they're all on their own, it's going to be much easier to kind of get weighted down with all the decisions that have to be made and the pressures that come along with this new enterprise if that support system doesn't exist. Is it right for the farm? You've got to take a look at where your farm is, where the dairy is right now, and say, is this the right time to implement a new enterprise and start a new enterprise for the business? Is all your production going well? Do you have any issues with, just on the milk production side? Because especially when it comes to processing, consistency of the milk that goes into your products is extremely important. So if you don't have that foundational aspect down, you really need to take the time, get a handle on that. Also, financially, is your dairy business in a place where you can, handle bringing on a new enterprise, because there is going to be financial pressure and financial investment required. And so you need to make sure, is your cash flow going well? And so you want to talk with your lender. I just went through an exercise a couple of weeks ago where it was actually for forestry, but the same concept applies where, with the forestry business, they were looking at adding a new enterprise into the business, and they had a room full of lenders looking at this business's budgets and cash flow, and on paper they were just skimming by, and so their current ratio was about 1. And for the existing enterprise, the lenders were like, okay, we're okay with this, but we're not comfortable lending them anymore for this new untested enterprise that they want to go into. So, this is same sort of situation here. If you want to go with a value-add enterprise and you're going to need investment, which most businesses typically do need to get a loan to go down this path, you really want to make sure you're financially set to do that. Do you have or have access to the skills and the knowledge necessary? And this particular question talks about the individual that's going to be in charge of the value-add enterprise. So, what do you know about the production of whatever product it is that you wish to produce? So if you're looking at cheese, what do you know about cheese production? So, do you need to invest some time learning about cheese production or yogurt production? Do you understand, all the different pieces of equipment and how they work and what the whole system is? Management, very, very important. Obviously dairy businesses themselves require a lot of management, and a value-added enterprise is going to be a completely different set of management skills that are required, especially if you want to go down the path of direct marketing or even wholesaling for that matter, because you've got, customers you're dealing with, distribution you might be dealing with, marketing, whole new set of skills that are going to be required there. Marketing, what do you know about marketing? So, you can't just say, if I make it, people will come. Not necessarily true. We all like to think that, our product's the greatest product that exists out there, and if all I have to do is make it and people will show up at my door and buy it and pay me whatever I want, but in reality, that's not true. So, what do you know about marketing, and what skills and resources do you have at your disposal there? Human resources, another very important point to value-add enterprises. Especially for small businesses, small dairy businesses that don't already have a lot of employees, or you're dealing with family members typically. If you have to start hiring outside individuals in to assist with the production or the marketing or the sales of this new product, are you equipped to handle that from a human resources perspective? And I know yesterday I sat in on the seminar that talked about hiring of employees, and so it's a whole new world with employees. And then there's public relations and the communications aspect. You're going to be dealing with either customers or clients, wholesale clients, and so how are you going to present yourself? How are you going to talk to them about your product, about your business? How are you going to be able to answer questions that they might have for you? And especially direct marketing, you're going to get questions about how do you produce, what are your production practices, what are your animal welfare practices, why is this product better for me than, say, somebody else's product, etc. And so, how are you going to not only answer that question, but what's your demeanor going to be like? And so, are you even perhaps the right person to be doing that, or do you need to maybe find somebody else that will handle that public face for you? What resources do you need? And this question really applies to more of the equipment side of things, production side of things, and so we'll address this a little bit more on a later slide. But associated with it, do you have access to those resources and perhaps the people with the skills to operate those resources and equipment? If you have very large investment in new equipment and you need people with the skills and the knowledge to properly operate those pieces of equipment, and perhaps that requires paying them more than you might for somebody that is less skilled. And then the last two questions really deal with the profitability key, which is what is the profit potential for whatever enterprise you're looking at. And I'm not going to say, you know, this product is more profitable than that product. Everybody's situation here is different. I imagine some of you have much smaller farms than others. Some are folks from Vermont, I take it by your sweatshirts, or Virginia. Not Vermont. Yeah, they say that they're in a very good place for marketing, and so, you know, location's very important. And so for others of you, you may be in a more rural location, and so all that's going to impact your bottom line, and so you're going to have to make decisions, you know, on how to market, who to market to, and that is going to impact your bottom line there. And so you're really going to want to take the time to, you know, do some financial planning. And then finally, are those financial resources available for startup or transition? Is anybody in here already producing a value-add product? No. Okay. So, one person. Okay. So, you know, if you're in that transition phase, you know, those financial pressures might be a little less than if you're going, you know, into startup. But the startup initial investments can be quite substantial. Depending on what, you know, the quantity that you're looking to produce, you know, how you're going to distribute it, and, you know, are you looking at personal investment from family members, or are you going to be going to your lender? And so everybody's going to have a slightly different situation there. Okay, so kind of typically the more exciting aspect of this presentation is looking at some of the different product options here. And this is kind of our processed products slide here. So we have cheese. Everybody first thinks of cheese typically when you say value-add dairy. And so there are several different types of cheese. And if you're in a state that allows raw milk cheeses, that's an option for you as well. But everything from soft to hard, different flavors, whatnot. But the key there, and actually this applies for all of the products on this slide, is, you know, you need to know your Code of Federal Regulations that outlines that standards of identity for each and every product that exists. So you can't call something cheddar if it doesn't meet their standards of identity. Okay. And so you can't call premium ice cream premium unless it meets the specific standards of identity that are outlined. So you really want to get knowledgeable about that Code of Federal Regulations. Yogurt, and then ice cream, fluid milk. Again, if you're in a state that allows raw milk, there is market out there for cream line. You know, in State College, we have a dairy that does sell cream line milk. And then there's a lot of miscellaneous dairy products out there, butter, pudding. These tend to be, you know, again, need to be pasteurized. If you're in an area that has kind of the Eastern European, I know we've seen the rise in kefir products, and I think it's becoming a little bit more mainstream as well. So, here's my slide about sources if you want to learn about the actual processing of any of those products on the previous slide. Penn State, I'll give you our plug. We have several short courses available. We have ice cream. We have 2 different ice cream courses. We have the very popular ice cream short course, and that's where our friends from Ben & Jerry's first came back in the late 70s to learn about ice cream manufacture. And so we have some good history there. We have a relatively recent, maybe about 5 years, science and art cheese making short course that we do, and that's one that I'm actually involved in from the marketing perspective. But we also have a cultured dairy products that addresses more of the yogurt and the cottage cheese and those products. And then a new program, we have dairy HACCP training. And so HACCP is going to be a very important part of everybody in this room. If you decide to go down value add, you'll need to have a HACCP plan in the future. But if you're not in Pennsylvania or can't make the trip to Pennsylvania, several of our other universities also have courses available, and these are just 3 that I know of. Wisconsin, Cal Poly, and Cornell all have some short courses out there as well. And I know there are private individuals also that offer training on the processing of different products. Okay, so the previous couple slides talked about those processed products. There are other value-added designations out there that people will pay a premium for. And so whether it's on top of a processed product or if it's just applied to your fluid milk. So local, that's really taken off in the past, say, 10 years. So people are very, very interested in purchasing locally, and you've got the buy fresh, buy local movement, you know your farmer, know your food movements, and so that's become very popular, and there's a good premium attached to that. And it's even recently become more popular than the organic movement. And so, but organic is still draws a premium. And so if you're producing organically and you are certified and can apply that USDA organic label to your product, that's an option for you as well. Grass-fed, natural, again, some other labeling designations that you may be interested in or may apply to your operation. I've mentioned it before, raw milk sales, if that's legal in your state. And then there are other practices or certifications out there that exist, especially around animal welfare and those sorts of situations. So when you do your market research and you identify that there's a substantial market that may be interested in those sorts of designations, you may be interested in learning more about what it takes to become certified. Okay, so back to the planning. And you can see I said I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on the processing of any products, and we didn't. So, but for each product, what will you need? So you're going to need different facilities. You cannot just start, making your cheese product, let's say, in your kitchen and then selling it. Great place to kind of test recipes, and a lot of people will spend years just testing their different recipes in their kitchen, but you cannot sell cheese that was made in your kitchen. So you're going to need to think about some specific manufacture and storage facilities, whether that's someplace that you go, like a cooperative kitchen, or whether you build your own facility on your farm. And there are regulations on how those facilities need to be built and the materials that they need to be built with too. So you really want to investigate that and spend the time. And I say this in a future slide, but get your milk inspector involved from the beginning. They will help you out. They've probably seen other operations and can help guide you. And that's another good point too. When it comes to facilities, go out and visit. If you know of any other farms that are processing products, go out and visit them, talk with them, get a tour of their facilities, talk to them about what works, if there's anything that they would change, what would they do differently. Sizes of equipment that you might purchase. It's from a financial perspective, it can be enticing to purchase small, but then if your business really takes off and you need to upgrade, you need more space, quantity to process more, then you've got to make an additional investment down the road, and so perhaps you'd be better off investing in a slightly larger equipment from the beginning, or vice versa. So you really want to spend some time doing that research. So what are those production equipment? Supplies. Don't forget about the supplies. You don't need just the physical stainless steel tank or whatever, but packaging materials, labels, those sorts of supplies that you may need. cheesecloth, the little presser things, the plastic forms for your cheese. And you can see I'm a little bit more familiar with cheese production than any of the others, but little cups if you're going to do yogurt, that sort of thing. Marketing supplies, don't forget about that. Again, marketing is really going to be the cornerstone to success for any of these value-added enterprise. So really take the time to think about what's your marketing plan going to be, and we're going to talk more about marketing in a little bit. So you can get some ideas there when you do that, but take the time, think about how you're going to market and what supplies you might need. Will you need, say, a refrigerated truck if you're going to be transporting perishable dairy products in a far distance? Would you need additional employees for the production or the marketing of any of these products? If you're going to go to farmers markets, let's say, to market your product, who's going to do that? Is that going to be you? Is that going to be some other employees? And then there's a whole host of additional requirements, needs that you need to investigate. Insurance. You're probably going to need some additional insurance that's separate than what you have existing already. Perhaps some legal counsel. Inventory control. How are you going to keep track of the inventory that you have and orders coming in? And that plays into HACCP as well. From my limited knowledge of HACCP plans, you've got to have the inventory control in place. That way, I think recalls, that sort of thing. And then regulatory. So what regulations do you need to follow, and what permits do you need to apply for there? And speaking of regulatory, you have both federal and state regulations that you need to be aware of. And this is where I was going to talk about your state inspector. Really get them involved. They know the regulations. I've heard that there's a little bit of difference between inspectors and how things are interpreted, but so you really want to get them involved from the beginning. And I've heard them say they are not your enemy. They really want you to know they are there for you. They want you to be successful. They're very positive about dairy producers going down the value-added dairy enterprise path, and so they want to see these enterprises succeed. They're not there to put obstacles in your way. It's easy to get that perception when they talk about, well, you need this or that, you need to set things up in a particular way, but they really do want to see you succeed. But back to regulations, you've got the Code of Federal Regulations dealing with good manufacturing processes and those standards of identity that I talked about earlier. And there's 3 different parts to the standards of identity: cheese, ice cream, and I forget what the third one is. But so really take the time to read through those and talk to your inspector about those. The Food Safety Modernization Act, this is the act that was recently implemented, and this is the one that includes HACCP. So all the dairy enterprises, you will need to have a HACCP plan put in place. And just from my experience with meat processors, HACCP planning can be very time intensive. So again, you've really got to build the time in for planning of all the different aspects of this new enterprise. And then there's FDA registration as a food manufacturer that you'll need to do. At the state level, and again, part of the reason I don't go in depth about the state regulations is because each state is slightly different in what they do. This is from Pennsylvania, and I suspect at the general level it's probably fairly similar in all the different states, but you're really going to want to talk to your inspector about that. Each state has their own code. Many defer to the PMO. However, there are some that do not. And so you want to be aware of the differences there, especially if you're in a state that does not defer to the PMO. You may need to register as a food manufacturer, and there's different permits and licenses that you are required there. There's some inspections that you need to be aware of. Typically, I think Pennsylvania, one of those is water inspection. And then there's milk and product testing that you may need to undergo as well. And there's also different permits depending on where you want to market your product in the end too. So I know in Pennsylvania there's some different permits if you want to have an on-farm store versus if you're going to go to a farmer's market. And those vary, at least in Pennsylvania, they vary from county to county. And then some of our urban areas have their own set of permits that if you want to sell, say in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, there's their own permits there that are required. Okay, so we're going to jump to marketing now, this is really kind of my area of expertise and the part that I enjoy. And this is also, as I've mentioned, the cornerstone to any successful enterprise. You've got to understand your market, know who they are, and be able to reach them. Otherwise, you're not going to be profitable and successful in selling your products. So the first thing you want to do is, figure out, are there consumers out there who are interested in your product? And who are those consumers? Are you looking at a wholesale market, which would be your intermediate buyers, or are you looking to direct market straight to the end consumer? Okay. And you're going to want to perform a lot of market research. And this as well takes some time to do. So you're going to want to look at those demographics for your target market. So, and the demographics refer to information is typically found on census data. So your age groups, your income, your gender, your race, geographic location, which is the second one there. Psychographic, this refers to what people believe or say they believe. So what are their feelings and their thoughts on different issues. So you have people out there who are, very much believe in buying local, and they will purchase the locally produced and sold product above any others, and that's just their belief system. But then you have that countered with their actual behavior. So sometimes people will say they believe something or value something, but in actual practice, that is not what they do. That's right. They go to the big box store and buy their food. And so, you're going to want to spend some time and say, okay, if I'm talking to people about, would you be willing to buy my product? And then you're going to actually want to try to watch what they do if you have that capability and say, okay, is this somebody that, has a history of purchasing, perhaps they invest or participate in a CSA, and so that gives some credence to them saying that they want to purchase locally versus, okay, they just go to the Walmart or the other whatever grocery store chain you might have in your area. And so you've got to balance that and figure it out, because everybody has ideals of what they would aspire to, and then there's what they actually do. So you have to start breaking down that target market based on some of these things. You want to try to figure out what is the price sensitivity of your target market. So how price sensitive are they? In certain areas, people are very price sensitive, and you're going to have to be aware of that. If that's your target consumer is somebody who perhaps doesn't have a lot of disposable income, they're going to be very price sensitive. So a 50 cents, $1 increase in your product, or if you go above a certain threshold, they may not be able or willing to spend that amount of money on a product. However, in other markets, though, people are not very price sensitive. And typically, we like to talk about New York City being an example of that. People will spend a lot of money on whatever it is that they desire. And so if they really want it, they will spend whatever it takes to get that product. And so you're going to want to figure out, who is your target market? What is their price sensitivity? And can you easily get in contact with that market that falls into that price sensitivity range that you're looking for? Can you coordinate supply and demand? And so we're going to talk a little bit here about the supply and demand, each side of it. The first one being, let's talk about calculating market demand. There, we've boiled this down into some simple-ish steps for calculating your market demand. First thing is to identify those markets. Are you going after, retail clients? Are you going after restaurants? Are you going after direct consumers? And everybody's going to be a little bit different in what they prefer. So just identify the big picture. Where are you going after? And then what's that total population or customer base of that market? So if you're going to go after restaurants in a 30-mile radius of your location, how many restaurants are there? Big picture. Okay. And then you're going to start to narrow that down. Okay. So then you say, if you're going after restaurants, you say, okay, well, I'm going to target Mexican restaurants, or I'm going to target restaurants that really put an emphasis on purchasing locally. And so narrow that from total number of restaurants, narrow that down, how many restaurants fall into that more narrower categorization. And then start talking with people at these market outlets that you're looking for and say, how much do you purchase? How often do you purchase? What sort of products are you looking for? So, you're doing some of this market research by talking to some individuals. And then if you're going after multiple outlets, so let's say you're going to do some direct sales as well as some restaurant sales, profile each of those market outlets individually so you have an idea of how much demand you're going to have from this outlet versus this other outlets that you're going after. And then finally, at the end, then aggregate all of your sales, and that can help you determine how much you're going to need to produce. So speaking of production, we just have a couple slides here about give you a feel for how quickly you can actually accumulate product here. So here's some and again, this is weekly product yield estimates. So if you're going to do fluid milk production, and down the left-hand side we have herd size, and then across the top we have percentage that is being dedicated to the production of the product. So you can see very easily if you've got a 100-cow herd and you take 100% of your milk production and either do fluid milk or yogurt production, and you've got over 35,000 gallons of milk or yogurt that you then, on a weekly basis, that you then have to be able to market. And do you, especially starting out, can you get rid of that much product on a weekly basis? And this is typically why we see folks that go into value add start small. They take a very small percentage of their milk production and dedicate it toward the value add enterprise, and they market the rest as usual. I just wanted to pull out one number. I did some quick math, and so if you have 50 head herd and you just took 10% of your milk production on a weekly basis towards yogurt production, you're over 38,000 6-ounce containers of yogurt. That's a huge amount of product to get rid of on a weekly basis. Again, this is a weekly basis. And yogurt is a very perishable product. So it's not like cheese. You can't just stick it back in storage and say, well, 3 weeks from now, I'll have a buyer for it. You've got to get rid of it. So is there a buyer for that much product? So that's yogurt. Okay. To make you feel a little bit better, here's the chart for cheese production. And I should say that this is kind of average production, no particular breed, no particular composition, and at least for cheese production, this is for cheddar cheese. So depending on what product you're looking for or, to produce, what type of cheese, what breed of cattle you have, your numbers are going to be different than what's here. And so, again, you can see, 10-cow herd, 10%, 36 pounds of cheese a week. And that's still a good deal of cheese when you're starting out, okay? Fortunately, hard cheese is a product that you can stockpile. And so you've got some more flexibility in going to market with that product. Ice cream production, again, same sort of table here. Ice cream, very seasonal product. How much ice cream do you think is being sold in Wisconsin in January? Probably not as much as, say, August. And so that's something to take into consideration too. And so, when you think about the production, how much milk you're going to dedicate towards the processing of any product, think about these seasonality flows. We know that sales of milk go up in the fall and cheese around the holiday time. So you've got to think about those sorts of issues when you think about the supply and demand for your products. So I've thrown in some trends here for different dairy products, and these are very general level trends. You're going to want to really take a look at the market that you're in, the location that you're in, and figure out what's going on in your specific areas in much more detail than what I have here. But in general, some research by Mintel just last fall. Their new research comes out in another month, I think, for 2014. But 2013, about 3% of individuals purchase dairy products from farmers markets or a produce store. Okay, so good numbers to know if you're thinking about direct marketing locally straight to the consumer. The percentage of individuals that purchase from those markets is higher for the younger generation. So another thing, you need to take into account generational differences, some of those demographic information. So 6% of individuals 25 to 34 are likely to purchase from farmers markets or produce. So if that's the way that you think you'd like to market your products, then you're probably looking at younger individuals as your target market. There's this trade-off between people enjoying these dairy products and concerns for health. And so you've got to be aware of that, and how are you going to address that with your marketing. And we've seen natural cheese sales, and natural is as opposed to processed cheese. And those sales have risen, and so now they account for almost 69% of sales. And this has grown 9% from 2008 to 2013. So people are really looking for those natural cheeses as opposed to kind of the processed cheese that is out there. Specifically to cheese, specialty cheese sales are on the rise, and so it's still growing, 16% growth from 2011 to 2013. It's down a little from 28% growth from 2005 or 2003 to 2005. So sales are still growing, but they're growing at a slower pace than they were in the past. And I think that's part of it. We've seen that interest rise, and this is what I'm really interested in seeing in the future is where do we get in the peak in terms of public interest for value-add dairy, as well as saturation from the dairy enterprises themselves, and seeing how many enterprises can the market support. So it is still growing, so there still is opportunity out there, but be aware of the growth is slowing. So you have to put some more emphasis on the need to be strategic and take a very business-like approach to a new enterprise. Specialty cheese is growing overall is increasing as a percentage of overall cheese sales. So just over 22% here in 2013. And the kind of an overall perspective that the researchers put on, or advice, was that people should really focus on these positive benefits that individuals are looking for, such as the protein that one can get from cheese, and offer preparation recipes. So from a marketing perspective, what can you do to help your consumer understand the benefits to cheese, as well as what can they do with cheese. So Some fluid milk trends. Flavored milk is on the rise, and that's seen as a more nutritious, healthy option compared to soda. So you really want to focus on the health attributes, which we've seen in some of the more recent ads. And then, some non-white consumers are more likely to purchase milk, they found in this survey, and about 25% of your consumers are concerned about growth hormones, GMOs, and very small percentage view raw milk as safe for adults. So again, if you're in one of those states. Here's some yogurt trends. Growth in yogurt sales is slowing. It's still going up. Greek yogurt, very popular. That's where we've seen a lot of the investment and for yogurt. And perception that it's very healthy and what just happened. I apologize. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Ice cream sales are still holding steady. When it comes to ice cream, people are really putting an emphasis on premium ice cream. They're willing to pay more for a small quantity of a very good ice cream, and it comes down to that health concern. Some other considerations, the kind of overall look of a consumer that's most interested in locally produced milk. Interestingly enough, I found it interesting. They're male, kind of middle-aged, fairly high income, and they have a postgraduate degree. Again, males in this age range, lower income, and just a college degree, looking at or most interested in grass-fed milk products. And then organic milk, then your target market shifts over to female consumers. Again, probably 35, 44, so they probably have some children in the household, above average income, and they're very highly educated as well. So you've really got to think about how you're going to promote your products in your enterprise, and promotion includes more than just typical advertising. So it includes public relations, events, social media, and sampling. And that's something that you need to build into your financial projections, is how much product you're going to lose to sampling, because it will drive sales, but it is something from a financial aspect. You're not selling that product, so there is a loss there on the financial side. But individuals are more likely to purchase after they've tasted it. What are your different distribution and market channel options? For distribution, it really comes down to, are you going to self-distribute, or are you going to hire somebody else to distribute on your behalf? There's a lot of cost with self-distribution, both in time and perhaps vehicles and equipment that you might need. So sometimes, depending on what market you're looking at, it can be more beneficial to hire somebody to do your distribution for you. Market channel options, got wholesale and retail. Wholesale are kind of those first four, so perhaps food service, retail stores, specialty stores, nonprofit institutions that are looking. We see a lot of schools and hospitals looking to purchase locally now. And finally, direct to consumer. And there's pros and cons to each of these. You've got to assess all of those for yourself and what works best for you and your business. One cheesemaker did this, and they actually sell both wholesale and retail, and these are their pros and cons for each of those. So you can see there's differences in the prices, seasonality, so they're looking at overall across the year, which one's more consistent, delivery efficiency, interaction with end consumer. And so if that's very important to you, if you're somebody who really wants to talk to the person that's buying your product, you're probably looking for more retail sales, especially direct to the consumer as opposed to wholesale. And then this particular business, they use the retail, specifically farmers markets, as a gateway to their wholesale customers. And so they still do, they started out retail, they started out in farmers markets, but they really built their wholesale marketing off of that. And right now, most of their sales goes into the wholesale channel, but they still do the retail, the farmers markets, because it keeps that interaction there, it keeps that connection, and that's how they make their contacts with the restaurants and with the grocery stores. Those folks are attending those farmers markets. Pricing, very important. First thing you have to do, you have to know your cost of production. Okay, so hopefully everybody here has a good handle on cost of production. If you don't, and you're thinking about value-added enterprise, take the time to get a handle, understand, know exactly what it costs you to produce, 100 pounds of milk. What marketing costs might you have? Okay, do you need any of these certifications? If you're looking to, to be able to capture the price premium on organic, what there's costs associated with being certified organic. There's even I won't say that. There may be costs associated with being locally produced, with the state certifications, depending on your state, what the rules are for your state. And then distribution costs. So when it comes down to what you actually charge, once you know your cost of production and everything that goes into that final product, do you want to take some time to do a competitive analysis? What are the other producers of similar products as to yours that are targeting the same target market? How are their products priced? And know the differences between your products. That way, if you're going to price higher or lower, you can explain why that is. Perhaps you have a pricing objective. The farm that I got the information for the previous slide, they have certain pricing objectives. There's some cheeses that they use and they produce simply because it allows them to produce other varieties of cheese that it's based off of, but that base cheese they produce and it's lower priced. And so it's kind of a gateway. You're going to want to look at point of sale feedback. Are people telling you, oh, I would pay more for this? Oh, this is really a lot. I think this is a little high, but I'm going to buy it anyway. And then what's that consumer demand? And you're going to want to track that over time. Keeping records is very important. And then finally, last slide, when you make your decision, you can see there's a lot of time spent in the planning, but when it finally comes to making your decision, you're going to want to look at those market and financial feasibility studies that you've done. Hopefully you've done some financial projections. You've done some investment analysis, and you know in the long run that your investment is going to be profitable. And then if it is, create a business plan. Can't state that any more emphatically. Take the time to create a business plan, know what it is that you're trying to accomplish with the business and how you're going to do it. And lay out, really know how you're going to run all the different aspects of this new enterprise. So with that, are there any additional questions? Anything I can answer?
I'm wondering if you've done much research or know much about co-packing, or if that's it seems to me it'd be a good way to kind of get into value added without as much, research or skill, know-how as far as,
Right.
I think you are getting.
Yeah. So the question had to do with co-packing, and it is an option. Facilities do exist out there that will co-pack or produce cheese on your behalf or whatever product it is. You can make sure that they're certified. Whatever different states have different certifications, so you want to investigate that. The one thing I know, at least when it comes to cheese, you couldn't market your cheese as farmstead per se, because farmstead cheese has to be produced from milk from one dairy, and the cheese itself has to be produced on the farm. So you're looking at some different labeling, perhaps, to be aware of.
What about risk and liability? You're betting the farm on this in a sense.
So the question had to do with risk and liability. It is true, it is very risky, and that's why proper planning is very important. And some dairies take the aspect of they are paying the milk production enterprise that market rate or higher in some cases. So they're going to make sure that the dairy itself is profitable, as well as the value-add enterprise. That way it lessens the risk to the overall business if the value-add enterprise goes down. But and from a liability aspect, you've got to be very concerned. You've got to make sure you've got all your insurance lined up and all your proper protocols and procedures. You're following all those regulations so that you lessen the liability, that if something does happen, that you can show that you are in compliance with everything that's required.
Do you recommend separate business entities so that you're not risking the farm, or can you separate?
That's probably so the question had to do with whether you should have the separate enterprises from a legal standpoint. I really couldn't comment on that. I would really refer you to your lawyer for that. So, but it's a good question, good thing to consider.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate your presentation. It was very interesting. So thank you. And I think, Sarah, you might be around if you do have a couple more questions for Sarah. Please feel free to come up and meet her. And I would like to thank you for attending the seminar, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day here at World Dairy Expo. I'd also invite you to please fill out the evaluations in there. If you don't have them already, they're at the back of the room. So thanks, and have a great day.